Donald Trump is not the savior of this country. We are the saviors of this country. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Virtue Signal. I'm Bill Little here with my friend and colleague, Alfonso Rachel. And this is the show where we try to talk a little bit about the stuff underneath the politics. And this one's a little more on the political side of the underneath the politics, though. Donald Trump was on a CNN town hall a few days ago as we record this. And opinions vary, but it looked to me like he kind of ate them alive. And I think the thing I'd like to talk about today is it's amazing what happens when you have somebody who's not willing to walk into these prepared kill boxes and just not play by the rules that are laid down by these people who build rules so that you can never succeed. He sounded good, looked good, but mostly he just plain didn't take the question. He just wouldn't answer the question. As one example, do you promise to abide by the results of the 2024 election, no matter what they are? And he said, well, if it's an honest election, I'd be honored to abide by the results. But yes, but will you abide by the results of the election regardless? And he said, if it's an honest election, you know what I mean? She's trying to paint him into this corner, trying to paint him as an election denier and all the rest of it. And he's just plain not going there. And it's been a little rocky for Donald Trump since 2020, rocky for the whole country and for all of us as well. But he seemed like he was in top form there. So I guess really the question I'm asking is the ability to fight back against the media the single most important quality for any candidate in 2024? I have an opinion on this myself, but I'd like to get yours.
It's important. I don't know if it's the single most important, only because it's, as I've said before, my big contention is, Don, do you know who the enemy is? I don't really think he does. I mean, in this, he looked like he was in top form. I mean, but he's been able to rehearse this attack for years now. It's like when he got into office, they hit him with stuff that he wasn't ready for. And like I said, it's like, man, you helped them do what it is that they did to you. You helped them do it. Now that you've been able to, reflect on it, Monday morning quarterback 2020, whatever you want to call it, he's had years to know what they're going to attack him with now. Okay. Now, when you go, and let's say you get, best case scenario, you get elected, and then they come up with some whole new stuff to attack you with. Are you going to be ready for that? Do you know who the enemy is who's attacking you? Have you registered who the enemy is yet?
Well, it strikes me that he probably has. I saw one of the high points. I only saw clips of the town hall, but one of the moments I liked the most was where the CNN person just kept trying to get him onto the January 6th thing again and again and again. And he said something to the effect of, all right, let me get this out. And he pulls out this timeline, and he's got a list of the things that he actually tweeted, time and date stamped and so on. Mm-hmm. And that to me seems to be, I'm not going to say that that's like a night and day difference, but it's nice to know what to ammo up for. Mm-hmm. And I think that he read a tweet he put out on the day before the so-called insurrection, and that just seemed to stop the conversation right there. So I certainly don't think he's going to make the same. Well, let's put it this way. I'll just simplify this. If it turns out there's another pandemic, I don't see Donald Trump appointing Dr. Fauci to be in charge of it.
You know what? That would be a good plan. But that's one of the reasons why I say, I mean, it looked good that he was ready to prepare. Look how long it took to be able to, for him to prepare to pull out this sheet of paper. It's like after attack, I say, maybe I need to have this prepared. Now, in the next thing, it's like, man, you might not get years to prepare for the next thing that they plan for. And, like I said, it's a good idea for you to get down to who these people are. The Constitution talks about who these people are, right? And it's like, that's something that you need to get to know and know about them. And if you can get that part down, that's like half the battle right there.
Well, one of the things I spoke about, I guess, on the last Stratosphere Lounge was if he is reelected, and certainly this is what I would do if I were president, especially if I was in his shoes. In terms of knowing who the enemy is, I would start investigations immediately, but I wouldn't go for the top first. I'd go for the bottom first. I would go and I'd get this guy. You remember Peter Strzok, the guy who swapped those emails back, the FBI agent, that smarmy, greasy looking, oily son of a gun who.
It doesn't narrow it down a lot, but I think I know.
Yeah, really. It's not a hard part to clear. But this was like a guy who basically sent emails to his girlfriend who was also in the department that it's up to the two of them to stop Trump. And so if it were up to me to clear the swamp out, I would take an approach that may seem a little counterintuitive. I would start at the bottom and I would get convictions on people in the FBI who could be shown to be guilty, Secret Service, whatever. I just start getting those bottom people. A lot of times you can get people to make a deal with you if, they'll get less of a sentence if they decide to provide evidence for higher up. But that's not even the reason I want to do it. If it were up to me and I go bullet in there and I immediately start with Hillary Clinton, let's say, or Joe Biden, then it's going to just look like a political attack and a political retribution, which it is and which it should be because that's what he deserves. But as another example, if I was going after Joe Biden, I wouldn't mention Joe Biden until I had Hunter Biden in jail. And so I would make the point of showing to the American people that these low-level things are corrupt. And then the people who are managing those people are corrupt. And then the people who sent out the managers, guys like James Comey and the rest of these guys, they're corrupt too, Eric Holder. And I would just work my way to the top. I'd kind of like run the film backwards, because these organizations were corrupted from the top down. So if I was Donald Trump and I was determined to really clean the stables this time and not assume that things weren't as bad as they actually were, I would start from the bottom and work my way up in a sort of inevitable pyramid of showing that the entire organization, the Democratic National Party, the Biden crime family, all of it is corrupt. But I wouldn't go for the top first. And if I were to bring charges, and I'd bring a lot of charges, I would have this thing so war gamed. I would try this case 4 or 5 times before I ever press charges. I would look for any of these errors that like Mark Furman and so on with the O.J. Simpson case. I get those bugs out of the way right away. And I'd never do what that guy Darden did. I'd never ask a question. It's the simplest rule of trial law, is never ask a question you don't know the answer to. So when the O.J. Simpson trial happens, can you try on this bloody glove and professional actor, with gloves on under the gloves? Oh, gee, it doesn't fit. I would rehearse the living daylights out of that and make sure that stuff didn't happen. But what do you think that he can do so that what would you recommend he do differently if he gets reelected in 2024?
Really quick, I want to address, man, I like your strategy, man. You're speaking like a martial artist. In martial arts, man, we call it chopping it down at the base.
Oh, okay.
A lot of times, in martial arts, you want to headhunt, right? You want to get that shot to the head. And your opponent most likely knows that's where you want to hit them too. So they're going to guard their head a lot. And this person is still trying to drill them at the head, when they got their body open. You got this nice big torso target that you can go after while they're trying to protect their head, preemptively trying to protect it. But better yet, you could just go ahead and start chopping at the base, be able to, take their legs out from underneath them. And that's I think a lot with, conservatives, we sometimes we think ambitiously. We need to go after the trying to throw stones at the top of the ivory tower. It's like, no, man, chop it down at the base, start getting into there. Go after those, start making those activist judges, that they be appointed.
Yep.
Start making them scared,
methodically, carefully, airtight fashion, one after the other, so that people who are upstream of the investigation start to sweat. Give them some time to sweat and let them think about whether they want to spend 40 years in prison or whether they want to tell them who gave them the orders to do the Russian collusion file or whatever the case may be.
Yes. Go after those guys, And in terms of what I would do, I think, and this is a message for conservatives in general, and I think a lot of them get it. I just don't know if they know. I don't know if it really registers with them. And I don't know if they really know how to go about by doing it. And it's, as I've said, thousands of times, one, it's a cultural approach. The culture has to be, there has to be this representation in the culture. If you want your political representation to be stable and to be solid, you have to have cultural representation that upholds that. And conservatives really don't have that. And a lot of times they not only do they not have it, they sabotage any chance of building it because they keep giving Democrats what they need to destroy it every time. One of those things that actually the main thing is the race narrative. The reason why Democrats can get away with all this sort of stuff, it doesn't matter what it is, Bill. It doesn't matter what it is. Unfortunately, out of a knee-jerk reaction or whichever, conservatives tend to respond exactly how Democrats plan for them to do it.
This is why they're as successful as they are.
Yes.
They understand the psychology and the rhetoric perfectly.
Yes. And the thing is, it's Bill, it's such a cheap strategy. It doesn't really take a genius to understand it. Unfortunately, but it works. You hit these emotional triggers. You expect conservatives to respond exactly how you want them to respond. And then from there, it just becomes a feedback loop. And I keep trying to tell conservatives, you don't want to respond that way. It's not going to be an admission of guilt for you. It's not going to be you giving up any ground or anything like that. What you're going to do is, like, since we're talking about martial arts, you are basically going to use their own weapons. You're going to use their own momentum. You're going to use their own strategy against them. It'll work. But, unfortunately, to this day, it's something that's not implemented. Trump doesn't do it. His voters don't do it. And I'm like, well, here we get, it looks like we're going to go through this again.
That's like the idea of swordlessness, right? The ultimate victory is where you walk into an enemy camp without any weapons. You use the enemy's sword against them. Mm-hmm. That's just complete mastery. So if their sword is this rhetorical, offensive, this concept, offensive of just perpetually attacking and painting and tarring your opponents with lies that don't ever have to be covered up because there's no chance to refute them when they own all the media outlets and so on. The thing I saw with Donald Trump on the town hall, and that I've seen with him before, obviously, is that he goes on the offensive with these people. And so can you give us an example of two things? First of all, we'll do one at a time. You mentioned we don't have cultural representation. What do you mean by that?
Actually, the only cultural representation that we seem to have is the representation that the Democrats make up for us.
In terms of the identity of who conservatives are and Republicans, who they are?
Yes, what conservatism is, what capitalism is, what the free market is, what national defense is, what the Second Amendment means, these things that we stand by, pro-life issues and things like that. Democrats are the ones drawing the narrative. And like I said, the weapon that they use the most effectively to do that is the race narrative. And from there, they can paint us however they want. In terms of culture, where is our representation really in mass radio? In terms of teleplays.
No, movies. We're always the villains in our own mythology. Absolutely.
Education. Even in education, man. Oh my goodness. Even in almost practically now, even in church. Right,
in church too. Yeah, God is gay, God is trans, that kind of thing.
Yes,
it's one thing for those people to say that, but there are let's just say church officials rather than pastors or whatever who invite people into church to say things like that to show everybody how forward and progressive they are, and it's kind of hard to win with a team that just keeps unlocking the doors, to the fort and putting out a big "come on in, we got free beer" sign to the invaders.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it for years, Bill, and I've even warned against this. When you have pastors, and a lot of times, even these pastors are more on the conservative side. They'll say, well, God is neither a Republican or a Democrat, and they say these things for an applause line. All you really did was polarize your congregation. It's like, and you're capitulating to this rule that we can't speak about politics in church in fear of losing your 501c3 status, which is another load of ground that the church should have never given up, right? Never should have given up that ground and and answer to the state on how they're going to conduct their sermons and how they're going to use their platform to edify people on how to vote according to our charter that recognize our God-given rights. But when I hear, these pastors, they say that, there's no such thing as a Republican or God's neither a Republican or a Democrat. That's a flat out lie. God is definitely not a Democrat. Definitely not. He's not interested in our vote. There is no majority rule as far as what people are going to say that's going to sway the way that he thinks. And he's going to make an edict according to our self-righteousness. He's not going to do that. But he's definitely way more Republican. If we're talking about a representative, well, Jesus is our high representative and he is the law and we are under his rule of law. That is definitely Republican. So it's like, it's for pastors to make this statement and just polarize their audience, you make them useless in terms of the voting discourse.
Make them useless, yeah.
Exactly. So we need to be mobilized to be able to do that. I'm not saying get out there and the pastors should be telling people how to vote, but they do need to be edified in a way where they understand that this platform right here, this lines up with our primary constitution, the word of God itself, and our national constitution. And what the Democrats are talking about is at total odds and fully antithetical with our eternal constitution and the constitution representing the supreme law of the land.
Okay, so just to wrap this up, if you were the president, I was going to say, if you were advising Donald Trump, I don't know if anybody really does advise Donald Trump on anything. If you were the president, what three things would you tackle? I wouldn't say first. What if you go in there, you really want to drain the swamp and you want to try and recover this country before there's still something left to recover? What three things would you do?
Oh man, that's a lot of stuff, man. That would be a lot of micromanaging. You know, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about micromanaging, and that's kind of like something that I guess a president wouldn't be doing. I would encourage, things, on a local level, whether it's, talking to the governors, and then from there talking to their county managers and whatnot. But as the president, which I don't see myself as being, but if I was advising Donald Trump, it's like, look, man, there's a lot of cultural repair that needs to be done. Okay. And it's not as difficult as you think. That the hard thing to change is the habits that you have. And the habits that a lot of people have. We recognize who the Democrats are, but the follow through cancels out everything that we do. Like, say, for instance, a lot of conservatives want to hear that there is no systemic racism. They want to hear and they convince themselves that there is no white supremacy. And they convince themselves and they want to hear that there's no white privilege. So basically what you guys are saying is that there's no such thing as Democrats. So America has, a history of these things because of Democrats. And you have conservatives that'll be like, we know that the Democrats, did Jim Crow and they did this and they were the Klan and they were the Confederacy and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, okay, that's great. So why do you cancel that out and you make your whole point moot and null and void when you say that there aren't these things? When Democrats bring up that charge, we'll be like, you're
damn right. And every single one of these things was caused by people who have the same political affiliation as you. And just run down the list. Bam, 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 bam.
And then from there,
I'm glad you pointed out. You pointed out the history of racism and white supremacy in this country. I'm really, really glad you pointed it out because, as it turns out, there's one side that's been fighting for freedom for Black people and one side that's been enslaving them since the beginning of this republic. So let's have that conversation right now.
Yes, absolutely.
And just boom.
Right. And now from there, conservatives need to be ready for the contingency. That being, well, there was a party switch and the parties have switched sides. And I'm like, look, man, parties don't switch sides the same way that you think that genders can switch sides. Okay.
That's right.
And then from there, it's like, look, I mean, even Malcolm X, before the so-called party switch, the so-called party switch that I guess could have happened at any time somewhere between Lee Atwater and Barry Goldwater and all that sort of stuff. And if there was this mass exodus, I think Barry Goldwater would have won. Okay, but anyway, Malcolm X even said, look, if you're voting for the Democrat Party, you're a political chump and a traitor to your race. Okay, he said that before there was a big party switch. So what was Black people's excuse for switching then? And what was really white people's excuse for switching then? And if Democrats all became Republicans, then where did those Republicans go? So it's like things like that. But
there's a short answer for that.
Yeah,
there was no party switch. There was a strategy switch.
Right.
There was a strategy switch on the part of the Democrats.
Yes.
Lyndon Johnson used a choice word for Black people in this country for most of his life. And basically he said, you know what, we're going to start handing people out. We're just going to basically buy Black people. We're going to make them dependent on the government. And we'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
Right.
And that's a direct quote from him. except of course I've toned it down just a little bit from what Johnson actually said.
That was the real Southern strategy.
So yeah, exactly. So you go from being a party that's openly in favor of Jim Crow and all the rest of it, and you realize you're going to lose every election from now on. So you say, okay, I'm not going to change my opinion of black people, but I am certainly going to change my strategy. I'm going to buy them off with trinkets. That's basically it, right? I'm going to buy Manhattan for $24 worth of shiny beads, and I'm going to hand off. I'm going to have these social welfare programs, Great Society programs, and I'm going to essentially say to them, if you vote for Democrats, we'll give you stuff. And they did, and they did, and look where we are now. These kind of things can be easily defeated, but number one, you have to know your facts, and number two, you have to know how to present those facts, and that is aggressively and defiantly. Like, you don't believe me? You out there, I see all of you shaking your head out there in the audience. You all have devices. Get out your devices and find out right now. Look at who wrote the Jim Crow laws. Look, find out what political party George Wallace was. Just look it up, and go at it that way. Now, if it was up to me to do three things in order, I would do, number one, I'm going to break up big tech, and I'm going to use the law. I'm not going to make it a political issue. I'm just going to say, look, you're either publishers or you're carriers. You're editorializing by censoring certain viewpoints to fit with your political prescription, your political disposition. And so therefore you are no longer carriers. So we're going to break you up. I just break them up the way they broke up Ma Bell. And when they broke up Ma Bell, phone rates just dropped. When they broke up the airlines in terms of their regulation, the rates just fell. I'd make this something, I think you'd get 90% of Americans behind you if you said, look, I don't want the government snooping on me, and you don't want the government snooping on you, and you don't want corporations taking your money or taking your buying preferences in order to blackmail you either, right? We're all on the same team on this, right? That's the first thing I'd do, because if you don't do that, you don't get to control information flow. And we've already seen that if you control the information flow, you can get away with anything. So first thing I'd do is break up big tech. Second thing I'd do is secure the border, and I would deport people aggressively. I would make a deal with Mexico to go in there and clean out these cartels, and I would basically look at this as a legitimate use for the United States Army, because it is a foreign invasion. I think you can make that case very clearly. And the third thing I would do is I would go after military readiness. I would put aside a lot more money. I'd rather have 7 carrier strike groups filled with fit people who are patriots and competent than 11 filled with uniformly, fat, weak-minded people who don't want to be there and are, basically carrying this woke infection through the military. I think you do those 3 things, everything else takes care of itself. If you can control the information, then you can make the cases for lower taxes and all the other things that follow. But those 3 things to me seem to be the crisis things, and I think the president has unique ability to do all 3 of those things in a way that many other issues he really needs the Congress for.
Sure, man. And of course, not to kick a dead horse, but a lot of those things are, contingent on if he can make the case culturally where the Republican Party stands and not deserving of this narrative that the Democrats have made on him. And
Yep.
I mean, it's even with the, doing the things with the, our social media and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm wondering how much leverage he could put on that, because these are things that, we use for free. And that's the big thing, folks. These things, they were bait. They used the image of them being free to get a whole lot of data from us. And now they're abusing that information to to deceive us and control us. And it's almost hard, like, I don't know if you know this, Bill, but the way information is, like, even when we say, hey, you can look this up and look at that stuff's starting to get scrubbed.
Oh, no, absolutely.
It's harder to find those truths now, man. Those things we learned about those stuff from using the internet, and before the internet, was becoming advent, we would start hearing these things, if you did your own research on them. But now, I mean, stuff is getting scrubbed, man. And the gatekeepers of the internet, that is something that would be great if we could get a handle on those.
I'd give up anything to get big tech broken up. I'd give up everything else on the table if that's what it took to break up big tech. That would be my absolute number one primary job, because without the control of if they control the information flow, as we've seen in 2020, if that Hunter Biden story was allowed to proceed, it would have been the end of Joe Biden, period, and hundreds of other cases as well. I think finally, folks, just to wrap this up, I really miss Ronald Reagan, and what Zoe and I have been talking about is not just that you have to fight back, but also the method in which you fight back. And Reagan, especially his humor, was just, it was so, look, the country's divided into three parts. There's incorrigible progressives, incorrigible conservatives, and there's a third part that will move. And when Reagan decided to go after Democrats and progressives, he said, just this one joke that I like so much, he said there was a Democratic meeting, and a lot of people there at a convention, and there was this kid there selling Democratic kittens for sale, Democratic kitten for sale, Democratic kittens for sale. But he kind of paid no attention to it. 2 weeks later, there was the same venue. There was a Republican convention, and sure enough, they had the same kid there, and he had the same kittens. They're going, Republican kittens for sale, Republican kittens for sale. And somebody came up to him and said, "Kid, these are the same kittens. Last week you were calling them Democratic kittens for sale. How come you're calling them Republican kittens now?" And he said, "Because now their eyes are open." And that kind of thing is ideal. It's that happy warrior kind of okay, it's kind of obvious. But just seeing Donald Trump dealing with CNN again and crossing swords with them and not allowing them to paint himself into a corner, when did you stop beating your wife kind of questions, that alone was reassuring. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but as Zoe points out constantly, and as I do too, it's important to remember that Donald Trump is not the savior of this country. We are the saviors of this country. And in 2016, we had a Republican president and a Republican Congress, and the Republican Congress dropped the ball as well. So we better get our act together and figure out what we want to save here. But I actually feel pretty good about it. I genuinely do. Because if I didn't, there'd be no point in doing the show, would there?
Right.
Which is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, who we're very grateful to always, and we kindly keep in our thoughts. And if you want to join them, you can go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. For Alfonso Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time here on The Virtue Signal.